been coaching women's university hockey since 1997. I did 7 years as an assistant coach at the University of Toronto. And along the way, I coached at various levels within the women's national team program, under 18, under 22, and then the senior national team. So yeah, heavily involved. Hockey is my passion, like all of you, and have an 8-year-old son, Connor, who isn't into hockey. He's into karate, but that's okay. And yeah, always looking to learn. So happy to be chatting with everybody this morning. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, Rick, I'll get you to introduce yourself.
Morning, everybody. Hi, Dan. Like yourself, Dan, longtime coach, probably more than 40 years, from Timbits to midget AAA and back again, and some time on the female side as well at Pee Wee Bantam level. Currently not coaching, but mentoring an organization and a group of teams that are finalizing their seasons for the most part.
Oh, now what happened? Wally, turn on your mic.
Tom Malloy.
Hi, Dan. I've coached every level. Right now I'm coaching under 13 girls. We're in the semifinal Saturday. Just found out my best D is gone somewhere. But anyways, I've coached at Mount Royal, SAIT, and UFC, half men, half women, for 22 years. I was with the Red Bulls in Salzburg. And yeah, that's about it. Just been around the game a lot.
Okay, Hal Terse.
Hi, good morning, Dan. I'm in Minnesota. Been coaching Bantams, girls JV, girls U15, and then the other 50 years, everything from pro, not pro, but college, NCAA, juniors, high school for about 15 years, high school boys. So a bunch of USA hockey stuff, but you do too much USA hockey, they get tired of you, so they get other people. But now I'm going to be putting together a coach development program for our local association, which is fallen on hard times, skill-wise, and so I'm going to try to rebuild it, starting at we call it squirts, you guys call it atoms or something like that, and mites and squirts. So anyways, thanks for joining us.
Dan, one other gentleman's trying to get on. His name is Peter Whitney, and like everybody else, he's coached at all levels. So I'm going to send him a link, Dan, but I just wanted you to sort of the email about Perry Pern's article and the title and what your request, you're asking for information on it. So I'm curious about that article, whether you found it, the title, and see if we can begin the topic and spin from there. So go ahead, Dan. I may be a little while figuring out how to get Peter Whitney on, but I'm sending him an email right now as we speak. So
Sure.
Dan, can you talk a bit about the Pern article and what?
Yep.
Okay,
yeah. So, we finished our season, we missed the playoffs. And so like most coaches, I'm in that process of evaluating our year and looking at kind of tools that we could look at games and how am I going to sell my players on the areas that we need to improve and what are those areas, and kind of taking a deeper dive statistically into what we do well or what we don't do well. And like a lot of you, I listened to a lot of different sources, and I had been listening to Carla McLeod on the Glass and Out podcast, and she referenced Perry Pern's 7 keys to winning that he used within the women's national team a few years ago, and that kind of piqued some thoughts for me. I was like, well, and she couldn't remember what they all were, but mentioned shots and winning the special teams game as 2 of them, and so I wanted to know what they all were. And years ago, I think when Jim Gumry was at Denver, he had like his 7 keys to success, and I thought that it was a kind of a good way of looking at the game, but I also felt that his 7 areas were very subjective and not very objective. And so I was looking at, are there objective measures to how you evaluate your game, and how do those factor into winning? Like, what's the recipe for success? So knowing that Wally is the guru of all things forgotten in hockey or remembered in hockey, I went to the source and asked him if he remembered, and he couldn't. But Wally, you put me in touch with Perry, so I actually had a phone call with him the other day on Tuesday, which was great. And he kind of walked me through some different things he's used, both with the national team and when he was at NAIT and in the NHL, in evaluating success. So a couple of the things that he mentioned, I know that I've used this quote before from him about, in the NHL, if you win the special teams game, you win 75% of the games. And so I wanted to know, like, what is winning the special teams game? Do you kind of pull it apart, or is it just like, you score on your power play, you don't get scored on your penalty kill, like you're a plus when you score? If you score shorthanded, that's a plus. And he said, yeah, basically that's it. If you can be neutral or positive, then you're going to win most games in the NHL. And that was based on his years of experience. And then that kind of, filtered over into some things that he used at NAIT, where he talked about, if we had fewer than 20 turnovers in a game and we had 80 hits, 80 finished checks or more, then we won 95% of the time. Over his long span at NAIT, he had charted that out, and I think it was in the high 90s, 90% or above, that when they did those two things, they were successful. And the feedback from teams that were playing them were, that, oh, you're really hard to play against, and we always knew we were in for a tough game. And then what was interesting too was how he kind of segmented those statistics out for his players. So basically every skater could have a turnover in the game and you could still be successful. One person could have a couple turnovers. And then I think they said for their D, they aimed to get 5 finished checks, 5 hits per D. So that's 30. And then for their forwards, they wanted to get 4. So I think that totals 78, in total. And then, you'd have to get a couple extra from a few extra players. But for me, I like that idea of segmenting it out, like how you proportion it across your lineup, that everybody has a share of that. And then that went in, he sent me the actual chart that they used with the national team at the rivalry series. So they looked at, and part of it was looking at like what the team was doing or wasn't doing, and then kind of developing some of these performance indicators. So one was shots with traffic or net front presence, that they wanted to get 12 shots per game with net front presence. So 4 per period. They wanted to have fewer than 20 turnovers in a game, so similar to that NAIT statistic. They wanted to be above 50% in face-offs percentage. They wanted to average 10 shots per period, and they wanted to get 30 shots or more in the game. And they wanted to have their shift length to be under 45 seconds. And because that was with the women's team, it was in relation to, if they were coming from their club teams where they're kind of playing these long extended shifts, and then they come in, it wasn't conducive to the style of game that he felt they needed to play. So that was why he included that one in. And then the other one that was really interesting to me, because I never really thought about it, was, are you winning by the end of the second period? And what was interesting to me was, because we often think about changing our lines, or changing, the order, or changing how we deploy that lineup in the third period to catch up. And he was saying that, like at the NHL level, basically, if you're winning by the end of the second, you're going to win a greater proportion of games than you lose, which, you know, makes sense. So like how you deploy your lineup in the last 5 minutes or 10 minutes of the second period may be more important than how you deploy them in the third period, where you're chasing a game if you're behind. So being even or keeping the lead by the end of the second was a key stat, and it made me think, wow, that's like was a really interesting statistic, because Chris Higgins, who now is scouting with Hockey Canada, but he coached at Western University, went to the national championships with them, and he's a statistics guy. You know, I remember having a conversation with him about, you know, the year that they were really good, you know, one of their key performance indicators was, did they win the third period? And if you win the third period, you win more games. And I think there's something to that. But then I think there's something to being, you know, if you win 2 periods, so you're leading by the end of the second, you've probably set yourself up for success too. And so that was an interesting point. And then it's kind of, how do you put all those things together? So that was kind of the jumping off point. And then for me now, it's kind of looking at the analysis of like how those things factor in. For me, it's like, is there a winning recipe? And you can probably do all those things successfully and you could still lose a game. But probably if you're doing all those things successfully, you're winning more games than you lose. So that's kind of where the impetus was for all of that. For me, was like, is there a recipe, and how do we define it? And then, you know, in talking with my assistant coach, Teresa, here, was, okay, 80 hits, what's that equate to in the women's game? You know, we have a stat called bumps, but hits necessarily aren't the same thing. So I liked how he termed it finished checks, but like, how do you finish a check in women's hockey? Is it the same? Is it 80? Is it 50? Is it 60? So I'll probably do a bit of analysis in the OUA league here and come up with a bit of some numbers there to see, based on some of what the best teams are doing and then what we're doing as well.
Wally, your mic's off.
I'm going to ask the others. Like I don't believe, it's been my philosophy a long time that everything you mentioned isn't as important as the part, the emotional intelligence of whatever you choose to focus on and how you apply it. So I'm going to let the others talk about that, because everything you said is brilliant. You know, I've seen stats and I've seen how they use it, and you can access anything from anybody. But whatever you choose to do, it's a matter of, are they going to be able to deliver on what you give them? And is your approach going to transmit belief and motivate them to be the best they can be? So, Peter, go ahead. Your hand is up.
Yeah, good morning, Dan. I just wondered if that chart that you mentioned, is that something that you can share? That part would be great. And Wally, to your point, right? All systems are good, but when you try to use all systems, nothing's good, right? So you got to find, from what Dan's talking about, what specifically will work with your team. One of the things that I ran across this year that I thought was really interesting, and I saw it with the team I was doing the color commentary for first, so it got me curious. And then I pulled up a couple Division I teams, and I found the same thing, that the teams that were scoring within the first 5 or the last 5 of a period tended to win the games. If you scored 2 or more times, first or last 5, majority of the time you won a game. And I thought that part was pretty interesting. And then you've got, conversely, the other side of that, where a lot of guys will play, you hear that phrase, first 5, last 5. That last 5, putting your best defensive 6 forwards out there, your 4 best D out there, so that you can try to create some momentum for the period coming up. So I think, to your point, all these things are really good, but you've got to figure out how they tailor to your team, right? If you don't have a team that is very physical, and they're more, let's say, skill oriented puck possession, and you're harping on them to, you got to take these many hits, you're kind of taking them away from what their strength of their game is too.
Okay, Peter, thank you. Listen, I think everybody on here has won at some point in time. Tom, he's won female championship national at Mount Royal. I've been through an Olympics and managed to be successful in one, but I've had a great deal of success because of not my knowledge, but because of how I was able to communicate with the players and my willingness to learn from them and from my own mistakes. And that started with coaching high school football with no experience. So the cultural thing here, and Rick, I know, has won national championship. He's won some major tournaments. And Tom, you go ahead and talk about your take on your keys to your success, and then Rick, sort of your keys, what's most important, what you would take away. Now, Dan's coaching, and Peter talked about the university level, and I imagine the pro level, they're breaking things down to that degree. But Tom, go ahead.
Well, when Perry was coaching Nate in its heyday, I coached against him for 4 years, and his teams were very intimidating. They did this he called a pinch, where they just came really hard, especially early in the game to get a lead, and they'd come really, really hard, and they were beating U of A regularly. Then they'd have a game in the big rink in Edmonton and have 14,000 people there, and they really, really did come at you hard, and he had lots of really good players. So, I can see where his 7 points are coming from because I saw them, and they're extremely difficult team to play. So, and I just wanted to say something. I've come upon something accidentally that's works the best I've ever came upon in my life with these 13 girls. At the start of practice, I have them all get a puck and they're skating around, and I blow the whistle and they have to do a tight turn towards the boards and take 5 hard strides. And I let them go for, a little time, do it again. And I do that, 4 or 6 times. Then I start blowing the whistle twice, so they have to go one way or another, like forwards lose guys on the boards. And it's incredible how they've incorporated in their game. I got my D are doing cutbacks on people all the time. And I've never really done anything that players have incorporated in the game more than this. And it's such a good, such a good thing, good habit to do, to lose your, who's ever chasing you. And then I'll get the D also. They'll take a step to the inside, like when someone's chasing you, you get the puck and you're going towards your own goal. Take a step to the inside, like 45-degree angle to the net, and then do the tight turn to lose a forechecker. And, those things. So I know it's not on Perry Pern, but I just thought I'd share that thing. But I agree with the stuff that Perry says, because I saw firsthand how good they were. At one point, they had 50-game winning streak in our league, like over a couple of seasons. And I know we beat them up in Edmonton and snapped their streak. A little really good goaltending one game and did that. But he really had it going at college.
Tom, your point on what he did, Dan, to me, however you break out, however you forecheck, whatever stats you keep, it's and I noticed this with Tom's teams, the breakout is a tight turn at any level, an evasive tight turn. And if you're doing breakouts and pre-scouting and figuring things out without a fundamental evasive tool to create time and space at any level, but Tom discovered it at that level, and I mentioned it early in the season because I watched Tom's team, and that to me is sort of the art of coaching, is what you do at the right time that's going to resonate with them at the age and skill level they're at to execute. It's sort of timing. Before I turn it over to Rick, I want to tell the story I remember about Perry Pern when he took over Nate, that team, his first year coaching college hockey. He inherited that team. He was given the job. They had a trip to Colorado College to play an exhibition series. And I hope I get the story fairly accurate. He's driving, they fly, and they've rented vans, and he's got the van with all the equipment in it, driving it. And he had a trainer driving another one and a player driving another one. And of course, he had to wait for everything while the other two vans headed off. And on the highway, maybe it was a half hour up the road, he saw one of the vans parked and 2 or 3 players pissing in the ditch with a beer in their hands. And what he did, to me, matters more about winning, because they got through the weekend. He realized that kind of thing is what he was dealing with at that age, that environment. He'd never coached it before. And when he got back after the weekend trip, the story he related was he withdrew their scholarships. End of story. He changed the culture to accept his beliefs, his understanding, his philosophy. And that's a very powerful turning point. And I know the coaches that I respect the most, and Claire Drake is one of them. And the reason he had success is not that he knew more than anybody else in any particular area, although he was very versed in playing without the puck, but his ability to get across to his team and to create a team were the difference, the separator. And that's the point I wanted to make. And Rick, I'm going to have you talk about your situation, because I really admire it at Rick's level of coaching. And you know, it's major midget, and coaching minor hockey is difficult. Probably more difficult, Dan, than your level, because I would suggest less parental interference in coaching occurring than you would face. So, Rick, go ahead and please relate your story.
I guess, Wally, if I had to put it into words, most successes that I've had have been relative to controlling the things you can. So to explain that, Wally's well familiar with my code of conduct concept, but we set parameters and get an understanding with our parent group and, most importantly, our players right from the get-go. This is the way we're going to do our business. From arrival times to all of the preparation that goes into a game and or a practice. Simple things like having your skate sharpened before you get there, have your sticks taped before you get there. Have 2 sticks. One isn't enough. If you break one, your game is done. You can't borrow from somebody. Little things like that, but essentially controlling all of the aspects of our existence together. And I guess you could capsulize that as culture. With the idea that if you can control the things that are easy to control, you're better able to control the things that are out of your control, that being what happens on the ice surface. I never felt that if I had a renegade group of players in the locker room, that I'd have an even worse situation on the ice surface. So we work with very strong fundamentals on training the players on skills, not so much on X's and O's, but more on concepts, on how to read the game and interpret what needs to happen and then the proper execution to cover that. And that's what's worked for me. That's not the magic formula for a lot of people. There's no great power plays or anything of that nature. I borrow and steal drills from everywhere. I create drills to accomplish something of a specific nature. Did that just last night with a U18 group to deal with an issue that they were having. So it's just good planning, lots of work, lots of thought, more work. You know, for a 1 hour practice or an hour and a quarter practice, which is all we get out here for the most part, you might put in 3, 4, 5 hours of prep, reworking, rethinking. No, that's not going to work. Let's try this, and then put it on the ice and see how it works, and then adjust further if you need to.
I think that's you know, a key, like that key piece. I think that art of coaching, the planning. For me, I think, you know, analytics has become such a huge part of the game of hockey at the pro level, that's filtering down to university and into youth hockey. But I think where a lot of the hockey community, and not this group, but I think, you know, the media around hockey and parents that are around hockey think that you can apply, you know, well, Connor McDavid plays this many minutes, so my little Johnny or Susie should play this many minutes because she's the best, he is the best player, or she's the best player. And I think for coaches, it's being able to filter that out, you know, in the context of your goals, your culture, what you're trying to achieve. So I think the analytics community is really good at telling us what's happening in the game. And for us as coaches, and this is, I guess, part of my journey with this topic or with this discussion, is like to know the why. Why, like, how do I want to change the team? What are we good at? What are we not good at? How can I, you know, Rick, to your point, then put that into practice, plan appropriately so that I can build the tactics, or as Tom was talking about, you know, that quick turn and 5 hard strides. You know, for me, I have a young team at the university level. We have, you know, 16 players in first or second year. So there's lots of mistakes happening, which is fine, but it's trying to get them to understand the way that I'd like us to play the game, that I think we need to play the game to be successful, not just to win hockey games. Because for me, you know, I think there are teams at the college or university level, and I think there's teams at the youth hockey level. And I don't like this style of hockey. It's not that it's not a good style of hockey, but I'm not a fan of dump and chase. So I know that if we played dump and chase hockey where I didn't have the puck on my players' sticks, we'd probably win a couple extra games because we wouldn't make mistakes that end up in our net. But, you know, if I want us to be a national contending team, we can't be a dump and chase team because you just can't get there if you don't have skill on the puck. So it's a conscious choice then for me to have to live with the pain of those turnovers from time to time as we go through that kind of growth period. And that was something, you know, Wally, I really enjoyed the conversation that you had with Thomas Pacina about like that whole puck possession style and how they worked it and how they practiced it with the Czech women's national team. And Carla talked about that. One of the challenges she had was then how do you convert that puck possession style to creating more offense, like more shots and volume. And so that's kind of where all this is triggered, is how do you take this data? How do you build the program that you want in terms of putting drills on the ice or games that make them think, and then how do you sell the philosophy? So I think all those things come together. And I 100% agree on culture. In fact, I don't know, Wally, I probably didn't tell you, but I'm back doing my master's, and it's in athlete leadership. So it's all around how you build that leadership and culture within a team. But it's like taking the science of it and then building the art. Like I think that's where the coach has so much work to do, is to take all of this data, all of the science of the game, And then the art is how to prescribe that so that your players buy in. So I don't know what the group thinks